project through from conception to balloting our first ballot of a Personal Advanced Care Plan CDA document. And I'm thankful that everybody has been able to help out and stick with us as much as possible. It's been a very rapid development cycle, and I'm pleased this evening to show you what we have prepared along the way and what we're going to be bringing forward to ballot. So tonight's session is really focused on where we are in the project right now. I'll cover a quick timeline overview to give those of you who aren't as familiar with what an HL7 project goes through as it ballots, a little bit about what that looks like and how to participate if you are not a member of HL7 but you would like to participate in the ballot process. I'll talk briefly about some publishing quality requirements that are required by the Structured Documents Working Group within HL7 to make sure that CDA IGs meet the mark on some basic standards. That's the main requirement right now for me to get this work into ballot, is to pass those quality requirements. We're at kind of an administrative point in the process. So while I'll be showing you quite a lot of content tonight, the point of balloting is to comment on that content. And the point in the next little couple of days that I need to get through is to be voted to go to ballot. So it's really about showing you that the materials are all in good working order and that we have what we think will be a sufficient sort of specification stood up that the industry would be able to comment on successfully. So we'll go over where all these balloting materials are stacking up in case you have any interest in taking a look at them right now for yourself. And then I'll spend the rest of the evening kind of walking you through. And I'm going to tip this upside down and start by showing you a couple of sample documents that will get you really excited, hopefully, about what we're producing. And then I'll drag you through the gory details of the Volume 1 and Volume 2 material that provides implementers with some guidance about how to achieve the cool documents that I showed you in the when I show the samples. So that's what our plan is for the evening. Let's start with this timeline. I'm going to keep my slides in this mode because I need to switch a lot. I'm going to take you into a lot of different documents. So hopefully it's big enough that you can appreciate these words here. We are about where that black line is in the process there. We got started back in September and met in October and November to walk through a process of looking at some requirements, figuring out what we were really going to aim as our scope to be able to do, did some assessment of documents like this that are out in the real world and what kind of content they need to represent and would need to share and exchange so that we could build something that could work with all types of personal advanced care plan documents. And now what you'll see is the submission that I'm putting forward to make a recipe sort of that other implementers could follow for how to start exchanging that information with each other. So once we get through the knothole of the vote on Thursday in structured documents, then the HL7 ballot process will begin. And this is a highly governed collaborative process that people can participate in to read through all the materials and comment very specifically. You can go line by line. You can talk about big ideas. You can comment on typos. All levels of contribution are accepted, submitted in an Excel spreadsheet that, they're kind of logged in, every comment. And then in January and March, it will be my responsibility and the responsibility of the teams that I'm working with to look at what we would put together as what's called the disposition. What do we propose would be the way to address this commenter's issue and work it into the specification so that over that couple of month period we can really improve the draft that we put forward. It gets so many ideas from lots of different places, and that collaborative result is always a much improved specification. In April, I have the painful job of just implementing all those good ideas. So that's just the nuts and bolts step of taking everything that we said we're going to do and doing it into the documents so that they get updated. And then that updated document is what would be published in May as a draft standard. And some projects sort of languish in their ballot reconciliation and take a very long time to come back with a final publishable document, but that is not the way we're going to run this project, because you'll see in a little bit later on, one of the areas that I document, our position is really these draft standards for trial use work best if you get them out there and let people try to use them. And then we use the HL7 DSTU comment process to get feedback back into the spec, make revision to the spec, and publish it with improved changes. This is something that I'm really crazy about doing in structured documents, and I've really pushed HL7 to be more responsive and have tighter iterations to run these improvement loops on their specs. So that's what we're going to be doing. If you are not an HL7 member, but you're interested in going through this balloting process, there is a way that you can pay $400 to have sort of like a temporary membership or a contained membership just for the purpose of participating in this project. And there are some instructions which I'll send out to you, to the whole group later, that really do a good job of describing the balloting process, the fee, how you get in touch with people if you have questions about anything, and then it goes into some step-by-step material about how do you get logged in and how do you use the ballot desktop to be able to participate in one of these ballot cycle pools. There's little coaching tips about how to actually do your commenting and submit your ballot. And so this is a pretty helpful document whether you've balloted as a member before or you'd like to ballot as a non-member for the first time. I'm going to include that just for the tips that it will provide. But if you want to get started and you still feel a little bit unsure of how to do that, you can just email me. My email's on the tail end there of this presentation, and I'd be glad to spend a couple minutes just walking through a sample ballot spreadsheet with you and helping you learn how to do that. Even if you decide not to participate through the standard HL7 process, this group, we're so appreciative for all the interest and feedback that you guys have provided that I will provide a sample ballot spreadsheet that if you want to, you can supply some comments to me privately. And although there isn't a governance requirement to produce proper, full dispositions and incorporate every remark, it is a way that you can influence what we're thinking as we go through ballot. And as long as the ideas are consistent with the types of changes that other official commenters are making, we have the opportunity to incorporate additional work. We would not be able to take a really bold, different idea that was not supplied through the official ballot and incorporate that into the work. There is a sort of an obligation that you stay on task and only modify the balloted material in ways that were required to address official commenters' issues. So we're constrained a little bit in what we can do, but I certainly would stretch as much as possible even to take private comment. And finally, if you're interested in participating, there's a pool sign-up that you need to get into. Even though the ballot doesn't open for a little while, you need to sign up before December 3rd. Otherwise, the doors kind of closed and you won't be able to participate in that way. So you can get out on that ballot desktop and get signed up. I think if anybody's confused about how to do that, just contact me and I can show you very easily. Any questions about balloting or ballot participation? Okay. The next thing to know about is this wiki site where we have accumulated all of our project information. If you are interested in this work, or if you are working with other people that you would want to point people to this work, even if you're not an HL7 member, this wiki as a read resource is accessible to you. And I put the link on the slide. It hangs off from the Structured Documents wiki. There's a nice repository of material that's built up where I've kept track of some of the things that we were thinking, the calls that we've done, minutes that we've taken, and the links to prior recordings, and then some open issues, not only about the name that we're using for the working title of the project right now, but a couple of little technical things that I've bumped into over the past month that have to do with specific implementation issues that I will have to get worked out while we go through the ballot process. And right underneath that, this archive area holds the documents that I'm about to walk you through and looking at. The ballot submission package is not prepared yet because this will go right down to the wire. Probably the final draft that I have ready November 29th will actually be what gets posted right here. But as we're working toward that, I have drafts of Volume 1 and drafts of Volume 2 and sample documents that are being posted up here almost daily now, between now and November 29th, if you want to watch any of this work for yourself. This is where you can get all of the sort of preliminary draft copies. I think that the next thing I wanted to talk about, so this right here is the link that will take you to that wiki site. And then I'm not going to say too much about the CDA IG quality criteria, except that I'm doing pretty good against it. The documents that you'll see are in good working order in terms of their title pages, and I'm going to be sending out some emails just requesting confirmation on how people want their names and titles spelled and their affiliations and stuff. So you'll get an email message asking for you, if you want to have your name as a contributor on this guide, to write back to me with exact spelling for your name and title. But for the most part, these documents are in really good order. The pieces that I have left to do that you won't see tonight have to do with combining little snippets of live templates into each area of the template IG in Volume 2, so that implementers can actually see little pieces of example for every template. And I tend to do that at the very end because otherwise it's incredibly painful to remember as you make a fix someplace else and then you have to go back into the document and fix it. It's a pain in the neck. So this will probably be one of the very last things that I do. And the next to the last thing that I do will be completing the Level 3 CDA sample. And that's the most tedious work of encoding the machine-readable entries that will accompany any of the material in the structured body. I'll give you a flavor for that, where we are with that right now. But that's about where things stand. We're in really good shape. I am going to walk you through now. See how I do navigating all this on the GoToMeeting. But I'd like to show you the sample documents before I take you into the 2 volumes of work. So here on my screen, and it is very small, and I apologize for that because I have occasionally figured out a way to make my XML get bigger, but it's always by accident, and I can't do it. It's something that I do with my mouse sometimes that makes the font get larger, but then I get myself into trouble. So I don't know. I think that's probably about as good as I'm going to do. I have 3 CDA documents that represent hand-done, drafts of a Level 1 and a Level 2 CDA for personal advanced care documents. What's interesting about these, in case you need a little bit of background, Level 1 documents have a structured header, and they do not have a structured body. So in this case, this embedded document has a structured header that has all of the information about the record target and the author and who entered the data, the custodian of the document, legal authenticators, all of this authenticators, all of this highly prescriptive information that is the top of every CDA document is populated in this level 1 CDA. But the body is unstructured. So I have prepared two examples, and I'll show you why this is so cool. One shows that it's possible to start with a PDF, encode that PDF in base 64, wrap it with a header that provides machine-readable entries about all of these important people and places that are involved with the document, and end up with a CDA document that can easily be turned back into, when shared, the PDF, the original PDF that it started out at. So if this is, it's kind of like magic, it's a magic trick. If this magic trick works, what you'll see is that if I take this encoded information and copy it from amidst the non-XML body of this, and an organization has an application that knows how to process 64-bit encoded data. I'm just going to use this little tool right here that converts text into PDFs and PDFs back into text. If I were to put that encoded right here and then pray that my magic dust works, when I download that PDF, here it is, Roger McBee's directive. So this information, without even worrying about getting to the point where you've got access to all the information, CDA documents can help us share digital PDFs, which is already a step in the right direction. The other level 1 type of CDA that we're specifying does the same thing, structured header, just as we went through, but rather than encoding the PDF like that, we just include a reference link to it. So the actual PDF file would travel in the transaction as part of the document set, along with this very small stubbed out kind of header. And this document, when presented, has the whole header information, but gives you access straight away that you could save it to a file or open it with a PDF reader, and boom, there you go. Another nice, slick way to enable people to share directives. These documents are all what you call level 1 CDAs, and many people kind of put their nose up at them and think that you're not doing anything special when you're transferring data in this way. But when you think about how powerful it is to have access to the people who have roles in the creation of this directive, the person themselves, their healthcare agents, their phone numbers, their addresses, their email addresses, all of that is in machine encoded format that can be processed right out of the header and shared in a very machine processable way. So I never stick my nose up at a level 1 CDA. But working more toward encoding the information, now we'll step in and look at how we show that the body of the document can actually hold the contents of that PDF. So for implementations that are ready to move into that space, same kind of header information that you saw before, but now you'll be looking at a structured body. And the structured body allows the content in that PDF document to be put into the XML in a machine processable way. Right now, I'm utilizing what's called the human readable narrative of one of these CDA documents. So the very first step is to take all of the content and put it into these processable sections. And once you have that, then when the document is shared, not only can a machine consume the header information, but the information, rather than looking at it inside of that sort of rendered PDF, you're looking at machine processable narrative. The structure of the CDA document allows you to navigate right to, I'm going to pop down to where the witnesses and notary section is. And these witnesses and notary here, Roger has signed his directive on July 31st, 2014. There's some statements, content that was made by the witnesses, and you can see that there were 2 witnesses, Mary Smith and John Smith, and what time they signed the document. If I go back up to the table of contents, you can very easily bounce through. Let's look at healthcare treatments and wishes. So now you could imagine much more efficient processing and viewing of the information by being able to utilize these contextual structured sections. And then within this section, this is where we put all the statements that have to do with what kind of care and treatment you would want under certain circumstances where you may be at the end of your life or in a severely debilitating condition. We can bounce back to decisions upon death. This was something that we talked about, and we've included in this example a consent to donate and an autopsy consent. So the next step beyond level 2 is when we go to a CDA document that has all this same information, but rather than presenting it in a way that the computer is really using the structure to navigate into the narrative to specific areas. Instead, what you will see is we'll go one step further and we'll take a statement like, let's take a statement like, if I'm having significant pain or suffering, I would like my doctors to consult a supportive and palliative care team to help treat my physical, emotional, and spiritual discomfort and to support my family. So this is a statement in this directive that the individual has made regarding their thoughts about palliative care. And so when we go to a level 3 CDA, what we'll be doing is standardizing on the question which that information answers. So all kinds of content that address the question of what does this person think, what is this person's thoughts about palliative care, will be coded in the same way so that a computer can know to find a person's thoughts about that particular type of information to know about, but the answer will not be coded. So the person is free to be able to make their statement as specific or as general as in the way that they feel comfortable representing what their answer to that question would be. So level 3 CDAs, I don't really have a way of you know, showing them in the style sheet. Brian Scheller has been amazing to help me with some of my other level 3 CDA work to produce specialized style sheets that expose not only the narrative but then the corresponding machine readable entries so that you can see, in fact, that the story being communicated to the machine and the story being communicated to the human really do match. But for now, you can just know that where we're going with level 3 is that these different statements and pieces of content where there is appropriate use cases for sharing it will be coded at a machine level. So that's what we've been building. That's sort of the type of the goal that this specification would provide, is that directions that many implementers who want to begin sharing these advanced directives would have a standard that they could put their content in and share it with another system, and that system would be able to process it and do useful things with sharing the information with the users on the other end. Any questions about the sample documents?
No,
Dr. O'Malley, did you, what do you think? I know you have some familiarity with this. What's your first impressions?
This is great. I didn't know we could do this with CDAs, and it makes me think of all the other use cases where this would be really helpful. So this is great. Wonderful.
I know. They sort of jumped over level 1 and level 2 and went straight into machine processable entries, and I'm like, there's a whole bunch of good stuff we can do that's a lot easier.
No, absolutely. And when you get to the point where you're going to be pulling information from folks who may not be able to create CDAs, but they can create PDFs, then you haven't locked them out of the system, which is really good.
Yep. I'm really excited about that. Okay, so now how do we take this vision that, you know, a handful of us have been working on for the past few months and communicate it in a way that a much larger audience could begin to understand what we're talking about? Volume 1 is aimed at doing that. It's the less technical of the two documents. It really gives this context and background to hopefully people who haven't even been watching what we've been doing at all would be able to pick up Volume 1 and understand what we're doing. I'm going to just show you the table of contents and talk a little bit about what we've created and how and why. So I made Volume 1 in this implementation guide very similar to what one would read if they read Consolidated CDA, because I do think of this document as being a companion document to fitting into the framework that has been established with Consolidated CDA. And so I wanted it very much to feel like it belongs right in that same body of work. So the chapters are aligned exactly with what, you know, just about exactly what's been done with CDA. I left some color highlighting in here, though, to explain that I've been very clear with my audience where I modified the material that is in Consolidated CDA, and I made it more specific. Sometimes I get a little bit, I teach a little bit. Sometimes I just, you know, spell out some things that other people don't talk about and maybe constrain it to make it more relevant for our specific use case here with advanced directives. So any place where you see blue highlight, there's material that folks that are familiar with Consolidated CDA would have read very similar words, but I've done something to make those words more specific to our implementation guide. And any place where you see yellow, I've invented new content. So this would be a section that hadn't really ever been balloted or looked at before. And so there's a table in the document under 1.3 where I call out each of the sections of the document where I have put new or more constrained content, and specifically ask readers to only comment on sections where there is new or constrained content. In areas of Volume 1 that are there to tell you about how Consolidated CDA and how templating in CDA works, how versioning works, et cetera, this is for someone who just needs to know the rules about how to use CDA, but it's no different than Consolidated CDA, and no work can be changed in these sections during the ballot. Some of what I did to the first chapter is just sort of, you know, what's in it, and it's not very it's administrative in nature. But the two chapters that are going to be most important to read and get involved with are this background chapter, which lays out all the work really that this industry group and others have helped me pull together in explaining what personal advanced care plan documents are, where they're positioned, to you know, why we need them, just all of the background that is context setting for that. And then what the information exchange requirements are as we share this information back and forth. What do we need to be able to do when we're sharing, because the content has to support that level of sharing. So we covered these two topics in our first meeting back in September, I think, and so those got written up there. And then use cases is a wonderful chapter that Monica Murphy Williams, helped us put together, and Scott Brown contributed to. And there are many use cases that cover about 4 different main topic areas, but they're written from a very person-centered point of view. So there's use cases about sharing these plans, just creating them so that you have them, updating them as a part of what needs to trigger the sharing, requesting access to them in emergency situations, and then making use of this content and working with them when it's not necessarily an emergency situation. So from those 4 main focal areas, we established a range of use cases that cover people of all different ages with different issues going on in their life. And my goal was to show how important this directives are, advanced directives or whatever we want to call them, advanced care plans, are to people of all ages going through, experiencing all different kinds of things. So I even included what I call illustrative stories that are told in a voice rather than kind of a more technical voice that talks about someone who's a certain age and what they're going through and what they want, a third-person kind of point of view. These stories are told from the person's own point of view. And you don't usually see this work done in Volume 1, but because this is a patient-generated document and I'm trying to really hit a home run on making this point about patient-centeredness and engaging the individuals, I felt obliged to really lend a voice to the individual in this Volume 1 document. So you should have some fun reading these stories. They're a great piece of work, and we're very thankful to Monica and Scott for all that they did to help us build some really good examples, a full range of examples too. That sort of sets the stage of the vision of what problem we're trying to solve, and in the space that we're looking at, the scope that we're aiming to address. After that, Chapter 3 begins to take on some of these more technical concepts that have to do with establishing the functional requirements for the content, based on what we talked about up in Chapter 2.2. And then I describe the benefit of exchanging CDA documents that are at some of these other levels. So Chapter 3.2 is both instructive in that it teaches what the different levels of CDA documents, what it means, where you have structured content, what's going on with the body, when do you get to machine-readable entries, etc. But it talks about the benefits that can be gained by beginning to exchange documents even at these lower levels. And I think this is unique, something that you won't find in any other CDA IG yet, to be promoting the use of all 3 levels. We come part of the discussion ready to dig into a greater understanding of the human readable narrative and the power of what I showed you in that Level 2 document, where we move beyond just a rendered PDF to content that's structured inside the body of the document, but in the human readable form. And so I get into what that is, how it works, and some special requirements that we have because of the safety issues and the efficacy issues of making sure that the information that's shared really represents the patient's thoughts and their wishes. And so these documents have a requirement that the only information that is ever communicated in a machine-readable entry would be information that is already presented in that human-readable form. There can be more human-readable than machine-readable because right now there really aren't use cases for all of this information being machine-processable down in the body of the document. But we certainly would never want situations where the machine, for some reason, gets indication that a patient has a certain goal or wish when, in fact, that can't be seen by the patient as they look at the narrative of their own document. So 3.3 spells out clear requirements for what we call H greater than equal to M, meaning that the human readable in these documents will always be carrying content that is greater than or equal to the content that's present in the machine readable entries. In the final chapters here, we get into the material I showed last time, which you missed, Dr. O'Malley, but I have some very detailed documents that show how the content in the patient-generated document relates to the content that are in other CDA artifacts like care plans and CCD documents that may have advanced directive sections in them. And just in case you didn't have a chance, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through it, but we basically have a set of illustrations that take us from some thinking that was done in care plan, devise a more detailed way of diagramming those relationships between the content, and then we use that syntax to describe how an advanced directive section inside a clinical summary would really be able to reference or point to information that might be coming from here. So this advanced directive section likes to help the doctor know where the patient's directive is. So there's a pointer that actually points to the document itself. And in the advanced directive section, the doctor or clinicians like to know who the healthcare agent is. And so there might not always be a healthcare agent, because obviously if the person is able to communicate and talk for themselves, these healthcare agents would not be in play. But if it was a situation where a health agent needed to be called on to make some decisions, then the clinician would want to be able to record who it is that they worked with as the patient's healthcare agent. So this information can inform what the doctor would need to record as who he spoke with and who he took direction from as the healthcare agent. And then for quick access into the information that's in these documents, which vary from, what you see in the directives can be different from place to place, making use of our standardization for the content allows this to have kind of an index to summarize what kind of content is down here in this document. So when it's verified, the clinician can indicate, in fact, that there was a perhaps an organ donation directive down in there, and then when they're going through and working with their own clinical information, they know when it's relevant to dig in and read what the person wanted the clinician to know or not. So this section includes that sort of description, as well as information about what might be possible in the future as we look at doing care plans that also reference a person's own advanced care planning information. We lay out all that, and I think we close the design chapter with some technicalities for that content crosswalk so that those linkages are expressed at a code level. We talk about our strategy to make a few machine-readable entries that we can envision would be most relevant right away. But my stance on this is that I don't like to make burden until we understand the use case of how it's going to be used. And so in an iterative fashion, the commitment here is to, as more machine processing crops up as a use case, love that section about organ donation. And what I really wish is that I just didn't know that it was a statement about organ donation. If they said they wanted to give their kidneys and their eyes, then could you make a machine-readable entry that actually had like the body parts in there so that we could have a way to more quickly find who might be a candidate to give a kidney, or I don't know, I'm just making that up. But we want to work with implementers to flesh out real, meaningful uses of machine-readable content. And as soon as those crop up, we'll make more machine-readable entries to go along with the few that we've defined so far. And then finally, I do a full walkthrough on the header elements, because many people are confused about the richness of data that's available in the header and I made a nice table that that makes this relevant to a patient-generated document. So it says who the record target is and what you can know about that, and that the author would be the same person as the record target because this is a patient-generated document. How to interpret what custodian means and some of the other participants or authenticators. There's just sort of seems a big gap in the general understanding about the header, and so I made a very explicit table to explain how all that works in a patient, a personal advanced care plan document. So that's about that's kind of the big issues for Volume 1. I think it's a rich document and a lot to be gained from it in terms of understanding the technical stuff that we've done, but more readable than Volume 2. Volume 2, oh, go ahead.
Can I just add a comment? So the questions are standardized and structured, and the answers are tagged to the question but are not structured.
They're not coded. So the
Okay,
value element of the observation can basically be a string, and it points to the actual text. So if you processed the answer, you would get back the person's own words, not some coded rendition of their words.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder on your diagram of sort of the crosswalk between the clinical summary and the care plan and the advanced directive, whether sort of the next iteration of that you could blow out the question, essentially each question as a separate little box, which may or may not be referenced.
Yes, that's exactly where we're going with this, and there'll be enough coded entries that you'll be able to. I'm going to probably ask Brian to help me make a style sheet because we did this for our care plan work, that the style sheet, rather than being your typical expose the narrative text approach, we'll make a style sheet that could actually show how if the clinician says, I'm interested in, they've said statements about end-of-life care, show me what they are. And boom, it could pop up the 3 things that they commented on, and you would know, this has to do with my thoughts on palliative care. This has to do with my thoughts on resuscitation or whatever that is. And that's sort of standardized so that even if one directive asks the question in a slightly different way, we can present the material to you where you would be expecting to see it. You'd see the question as it was posed in their directive and their answer as they gave it.
Yeah, this is spectacular.
Oh, thanks. So, so this is pretty cool. And then the last thing, I want to show you a little bit about Volume 2. A lot of people, don't go in and comment in Volume 2, but Volume 2 is the constraint language that shows us how to narrow our use of CDA, which is a really big and crazy capable standard. You can just do anything with it. But this just limits what we're going to do so that exchange partners have some rules in the game for how we can expect these kinds of documents to shape up. And we have established these sections. What did I see? Which, not right now. We have established, there's the document and then the constraints on the header that give you the behavior that I just described in Volume 1. And then for each of these sections, we're basically using our content analysis that we did to say you can bucket all of the things that people put in their directives into these 5 buckets. Things that have to do with care that they want to receive if, at end of life or if they were severely debilitated. Statements that they might want to make about what they would want to have happen after they died. Things that have to do with appointing healthcare agents. Some other comments, and sometimes they're called my thoughts or around other considerations that just would help improve or might be relevant for their experience of care. This section right here, the Personal Advanced Directive section, this section just encompasses all these other sections. So it's like sort of the big wrapper around these other parts, that even if you had an implementation that was not crafty enough to break the directives in sections, you would still have the ability to carry your content in this one outer section. So it sort of even like makes the bar a little bit lower for people that might just really be getting started. You could put all the text in human readable form inside the body of the section, this one section, and you'd still have a valid document. We do encourage the notary section, and we do encourage the healthcare agent appointment section. Those are both shoulds, but the other ones are mays, and you have to overarching advanced directive section. Breaking into, I want to get that gray off there. Let me see how I can do that. Okay. Breaking into machine processable entries. What we did is borrow from some of the work that has already been done in Consolidated CDA. So I'm using the clinical statement pattern that was established for goals and the clinical statement pattern that was established for interventions back in the care plan when you saw that. So when a person makes a statement about a specific health goal that they have, this machine-readable entry will be structured in exactly the same way that you could put it right into a care plan document. The author, of course, would be the patient rather than a clinician, but for that, this goal is structured in exactly the same way. And for interventions that may be planned, if a person says that they want a certain intervention or they do not want a certain intervention, we've used added negation in as a possibility here so that you can make very tight statements specifically saying, like, I do not want another CT scan. You could structure that in a machine processable way. This is very forward-looking, you know, to think that we're going to have applications coming along that will already help us identify where patients have goals that are different from their clinician's goals, or where treatments are being recommended that a patient doesn't want. This is the very forward edge of where we think that this could go, but I wanted to at least test, you know, make people who want to experiment at that level make it possible with those kind of entries. I did add an entry that is a Boolean entry that gives indication of whether or not a person has a MOLST or POLST. So this is it's like a flag, true or false. And if it's true, then this template allows a reference link to an external document. So if someone does have the support of their physician and an order has been created for a DNR, and let's say they have gone home to die, and they do not want the EMTs showing up and resuscitating them on the way to the hospital, their directives can say, I do have a MOLST, and boom, reference the document just like you saw that other PDF pop up, and that can become immediate available for reference to accompany the person's own directives. These care experience considerations are one of the most generalized kind of statement. It's that really simple pattern that says the question is about this kind of question, and here's the person's answer. Very free form, but gives the computer the ability to grab onto what the question is and grab onto the answer that goes along with it. So you get those little pairs. And then finally, I built an organizer. So in certain circumstances where directives ask people about what their priorities are, we actually have the ability to put either goals, preferences, or some of these other experience considerations into an organizer that's structured, that has sequential numbers on the drawers, basically, so you can put the top priority thing in the top slot. And there was an example, I think, that we saw when we look at this directive. There's a little example here where someone can talk about some goals, and this person said, you know, their top thing is being at peace with my God, then being able to feed, bathe, and take care of myself, being free from pain, resolving conflicts, being with my family, not being a financial burden. So the application that allows the person to put this set of priorities together allows them to shift these up and down, and there's other ones that could be in the list and whatnot. And if we wanted to be able to represent this in some sort of machine processable way, then we can put that in this organizer. Oops, that's volume 1, sorry. Put that in that organizer and actually put those statements in a fixed order so that you could process at that level. This is all way pie in the sky. Gosh, we'd be so happy if we were just exchanging, had these documents accessible in digital form. But just in case we want to really go for it, this is what I've built.
Lisa, this is absolutely perfect, because you referenced earlier when sometimes the clinicians have a different order of priorities than the individual. And this is where, if you're able to establish the individual's priorities, you can also use a similar process to establish the care team's priorities. And the comparison of those two sets is an interesting measure in and of itself. It's sort of the concordance between what the individual wants and what the care team wants, or what they're working towards. And that, I think, is going to really open up healthcare. So anyway, I think you're right on the trail.
Good.
One minor comment.
Yes.
I think you should purge the word patient from any part of this document. So wherever it's a patient, it's a person.
Yeah. Have I got a few of them?
Yeah. So wherever you have it, just do a, Alt, Delete, Replace.
Global substitute. Yeah. I'm at the point right now where I have many little details that have to get ready to go to ballot, and that's a comment that we could put in at ballot time, and I'll definitely do that. I have a list. Someone sent me 43 items that are sort of typos and wording things that I could do, and I'm so stretched right now to get everything done. I'm going to see how many I can fit in before ballot, but ballot is really just crossing the starting line. It's not crossing the finish line. Right. And so we'll have the opportunity over the next few months to make this work better and more perfect than it is right now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if I had anything else. Go ahead.
2 thumbs up.
Oh, 2 thumbs. Thank you very much. I guess that's it. We have like 5 minutes just to chat about whatever else you might see that's going on or is relevant that we should know about, given what we're trying to do here.
Not so much on what you...
How do you think my directive, you think it's going to be well received, Dr. O'Malley? Do you think many people will comment, or do you think people will, average number of usual participants, and then when it's ready that people will be glad to receive it? How do you think it will go?
Yeah, I think it's extraordinarily thoughtful, and I really do like the forward-looking parts. Again, we may not get there quickly, but the path is laid out, which is wonderful. Now, I think this is going to be really well received. I think it's very straightforward. I think the categories make a lot of sense. I think tying it to the standard questions is going to, people are going to go, so that's how that works. I think there are going to be a lot of light bulbs going off over people's heads. The question I have for you is the same approach that you've done for the advanced care plan. Is anyone thinking about sort of turning around and looking at the care plan as a whole and applying this similar type of structure and approach?
It is my whole other, if you looked at all I do right now, all I do is care plan stuff. And my goal in working across all these spaces, so I'm involved with the patient care work group with their care plan DAM, doing some piloting with Blue Cross Blue Shield Association to demonstrate use of the care plan document, and like a little bee, I'm out there pollinating these ideas in many different places. Even working with a group at the CDC that is doing early hearing care plans for babies that have hearing issues. And every place I go, we make more and more care plans that are using these same concepts so that they'll all be able to work together.
Perfect. Because that's really what they are. They're all just a series of plans. I loved HL7's comment when we did the LCC part. He said, a plan is a plan is a plan. So, you know, and they're all aggregates of other plans. So
exactly.
yeah.
There's an interesting piece of work that I'm working on right now in IHE also that's called dynamic care planning. And a group of people who understand care plans are taking it to the next level to really explore how do we reconcile. And you know that game you play as a kid where you put your hand down and then somebody else puts their hand down and then somebody puts their hand on top of that and it just goes faster and faster. And it's like a specification to help to understand how we pull these care plans together as you get a plan upon a plan upon a plan upon a plan.
Yep. Yeah, it gets complicated very quickly. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
all right, well, we're just about at time. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this space, and I do feel that having we took a small bite here with advanced directives, and I think it gave us the opportunity to demonstrate some fundamentals in a really contained kind of space that people can easily get it, start to work with it, and then as the industry says, oh, I got an organizer that works like that. Where else could I use that?
Right, exactly. I could use it over here. That's perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. Great, great, great. This is just such foundational stuff. So,
super. Okay, so the only action items that people are going to get from me right now are there's going to be, I'll send out minutes, but there'll be an email message that asks, thanking everyone for their participation and asks that anyone who would like to be identified as part of the industry group to just send me their full name and credentials and affiliation the way that they would like to have it printed, and then we'll be crossing the starting line, hopefully, between now and Thanksgiving.
That's great. Well, spectacular
Lisa,
job.
This is
Sorry,
Scott.
Brian,
I'm going to break in one. I'm going to break in one more time just before we drop off. And Lisa, and thank you, and again for all the work that you're doing. You know, we're big supporters and think it's outstanding. And Dr. O'Malley, thank you for joining the call today. It's good to hear your voice again. And you know, I know that there are, Lisa, you've got lots of priorities. If I can second Dr. O'Malley's suggestion that you replace patient with person, you know, that if you could get that up on the list, I'd love to see that one too, obviously. So, but I think you know, I know the work that you're doing, and we appreciate it and think it's wonderful.
I will do my very best. Sometimes the sentences don't read right. It's not as easy as a global substitution.
I was actually noticing he wasn't wearing.
But I will do my very best. I'll count how many there are and try and leave time to make that happen before we go out to ballot.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
thank
everybody. Thank you very much, and Brian, thank you for all your support. I'll be hopefully I'll be asking you about style sheets in sometime soon.
Great if it did. No problem. Look forward to it.
Okay.
Great.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you all.
Great.